I'm Amber. It is my privilege to chair our industry panel today. And I would introduce these fine fellas, but I think they'll do a much better job of introducing themselves personally. So if I can get you guys to give a few minutes on who you are, your background, you know, industry, farm, whatever you're doing that's currently relevant, and then just hit the next guy and pass off the buck. That okay? Okay, we'll start with you, John.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think Doug did my introduction earlier, so I don't have to, but anyway, I farm in the Strathmore area, right from Calgary to east of Strathmore. We're hay and cattle and reclamation. So of course, AFIN, my interest is forages, and a few things that I'm pretty passionate about. I grew up I work in a area of big grain farms, and these guys traditionally have farmed every acre, regardless of whether they should be or not, whether it's paying or not, and a lot of alkali in our area. So I got some real progressive, really good young guys in my area. And I've been pretty successful in getting all of them to grow some forages today. And even some of them moving up to irrigated alfalfa in their rotations and irrigated timothy, not just the poor land. So, and again, when we get into reclamation, I'm working on solar projects the last few years, and that is getting so crazy big in southern Alberta that there's an opportunity there to work on different varieties, and what varieties grow in our area don't necessarily work in gray wooded or northern Alberta. So variety that works in our area is really important.
Hello. Yep. Name is Eric Boot. My family and I farm south of Fort Macleod, right along the banks of the Billabelly River, mostly irrigated. So I am a lot of former things. Former dairyman, grew up on a dairy farm till I was about 32. Our family decided to get out of the dairy, and I have 10 brothers. So 3 of them we dispatched to Saskatchewan in the Outlook area. They're still currently farming there. I stayed on the home farm. So, you know, in that time frame, we also fed cattle back around about 1,500 head. Cow calf, it looked promising. We had some river bottom, so we grazed them there. Then we come to about 2015, we decided to get out of all of that, no more cattle. In the meantime, in 2019, we started doing export timothy for Japanese market. We chose, our family, really loved putting up hay and not have any fun during the summer and working in hayfield. So we decided to give that a go. So then just in 2019, we also went on the blood reserve where we're currently farming timothy as well for the export market. So I think that's about a wrap.
As Doug introduced, from Longview, Alberta, we are in the foothills, primarily native grass with deferred grazing on our old tame forages at our old hayfields that we now save the native grass for strictly winter and grow hay also. Been around there since 1906, I guess. You don't look that old. Thank you, John. I've aged well. Not too much else there.
Okay, the theme of the conference is, you got me there. Theme of the conference is future of forages. So could we have you guys say what that means to you and what you think that looks like coming up?
Well, definitely we covered a lot of topics here today, and Mark just mentioned here research, new varieties. I like to test on my own farm different varieties that are coming along. And as I said, they don't all work on my farm. Moisture being the limiting factor in our area. I've seen some tremendous cover crops in other areas. They don't work in my area, or they haven't, because anytime I've tried them, I've had inadequate moisture. But I think research is such a big one. There has to be new varieties coming along all the time, like Saltlander developed one of the best things that ever happened in southern Alberta, in my opinion. That's a pretty new one, and really performs well in alkali areas, similar to tall wheatgrass in where it'll grow, but obviously a lot more forage from it. So I think research is going to continue to be, and like I said, even on-farm research, that any of us want to try different varieties in our area.
Yeah, I'll kind of work backwards on that. So from a market perspective, we do small square bales and some pet food as well. We're seeing huge potential in that market, value added. From the domestic side, meaning local, it's all about quality forages. So that's, there's a huge future if you grow, high quality forages. There will always be a market. From a growth perspective, what do I see as future? We're starting to switch, and it's, probably the writings on the wall. We're going to be, using less fertilizer, your nitrogen especially. So we're doing a program this year using a lot of biologicals. So we're looking, dabbling and doing research, just like John says, right? So, yeah.
As John said, with the research, as we see more move away from the small plots onto the larger areas done on farm, led by the applied research associations, I think that's important because we're getting more of what's relevant to us on our operations.
What impact has research had on your farm? On your farms?
Well, I guess I kind of mentioned it last time. Saltlander is one of the newest grasses I use. You know what? I was around when meadow brome was first developed, and it's been a big one in our operation. Syria's done sandfoin. I haven't grown a lot of sandfoin. I've used some of it in my mixes. Again, getting back to research, there is a couple that they claim are salt tolerant alfalfas, which I don't know whether there's been any real research to say what varieties are more salt tolerant than others. But I think we just got to keep working on those kind of things.
Yeah, there's obviously been a lot of research done and, variety trials going back 20 years. We were involved with some Timothy trials at Lethbridge Research Station at the time, and, different nitrogen applications and how they affected yield and the stand over a term. So, going forward, the research that I, more constantly, it's all about soil health now, and how can we produce more without using less inputs, and we're all irrigated, so we have an excellent opportunity, which kind of eliminates the moisture problem, and as well as irrigation itself, right? We need to we had some huge bills last summer, power bills, and we're looking at that too, where we're doing more accurate moisturing sampling.
Researching new cultivars, the sandfoin's the Sisal milk vetch. We planted Sisal milk vetch first in 1991. It established about 15 years later. We finally had enough plants that you could see it regularly, and now it's setting seed continually, so it's spreading. Maybe spreading too far, but it's spreading well. The sandfoin, the longer lasting legumes, the sandfoin staying in there. We've got a lot of free nitrogen above us in the air, so if we can capture that and take it down the soil for the grasses to use.
What do you guys think would be some of the biggest challenges that your industries face currently?
Well, input costs, whether you're a grain farmer or hay farmer, fertilizer costs are huge. Our fuel costs doubled last year. Our machinery costs are nearly doubling. So input costs is such a big one at the present time.
Yeah, of course, we come off some, high costs there. Challenges, labor for us is always a challenge. During the summer, we'll, hire up to 15, 16 people, in a fairly short order, you know, we're mostly do a lot of harvesting in July, and then we usually get our August a little slower, and then, you know, back in September and October. And July, we usually don't have the labor problem as much because a lot of students, but, you know, you get into the September, October, it's a lot more challenging. I think that's, you know, I mean, there's always a lot of challenges running a farm, but that presently is kind of overriding, I think, yeah.
Conversion of perennial pastures to cropland's a huge one. Even worse is conversion of native grasslands to cropland. I thought they're all done with that, but they are still converting in areas some native grassland that cannot be replaced no matter how hard we try. Took a long time to get established. I think that's one of our biggest, it's my biggest concerns.
Cool. Just so you guys know, Amanda does have a mic. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw your hand up. And in the meantime, what do you guys think would be your, what are some solutions? That's going to be the really challenging question.
Before we get into solutions, I'm going to throw out another one. Today, most of my livestock are inside Calgary city limits. So urban growth in our area. If anybody knows Calgary, where mahogany is, I at one time farmed all of mahogany. And the amount of land that's, they don't even consider the value of farmland anymore. They look at wetlands, but if you have enough money as a developer, you write a big check and the wetlands go away. So even though they talk about wetlands so much in our rural areas, urban growth is huge in our area. So what was the question I'm supposed to be talking about? What's the old saying? High prices solve high prices. So I think somebody else alluded to today in the crop sector, the fertilizer companies and a bunch of them make sure that the farmers don't get too rich too quick. They'll always take back a good portion of that. So, you know, we're in cycles, and I'm sure our fuel, all our costs are in cycles. They've blamed everything on COVID. They blamed everything on steel prices. We've actually seen some steel prices drastically dropping in the last couple of months. So that should lower some of our equipment costs.
Yeah, solutions. You know, of course, yeah, this takes a lot of thought and just, you know, being on the spot here. You know, as far as the labor one, I was kind of encouraged today here that, you know, the ag colleges, you know, both Lethbridge and Olds are, you know, they're getting the numbers of students in. So, you know, that's always encouraging because, you know, a lot of our equipment and, you know, the things we do take some expertise. You know, they need to have that background or education, you know, to run some of this, you know, the equipment as well as, you know, the ag side of our business. So, yeah.
Am I on? John stole my answer regarding the secret to, or the cure for high prices is high prices, in fact. As you said, we're already seeing those coming down. We should see, hopefully the hay acres will increase with that and see some coming back to normal in the price of hay, because for the cattle producers, it's getting very expensive for us to be buying.
Question, Doug.
Yeah, am I on? Okay. My observation in our area is all my grain farming neighbors have added bin space on the same acres in the last 5-6 years. So their productivity per acre has gone up substantially. Their yields are climbing, and I think in the forage world, particularly the perennial forage world, we're just not keeping up. So that's what's pulling acres away from forages. You just can't create the same sort of margins as they can, you know. I mean, everybody in our area has grown us 50, 60 bushel or canola crop and 100 bushel wheat crop. And, you know, what has the hay acres done? Well, you know, nobody's had a 20% increase in their hay yield. And we haven't seen it in our pasture yields either. So I think, you know, that perennial, getting some perennial genetics that would make us more efficiently competitive, we got to grow more tonnage per inch of rain. It's because rain's our limiting factor. So So that one I think is an issue. And do we have the capacity? We've got Harry in Lethbridge now, but you know, we need the will and the capacity and the focus to get some, you know, we need another Meadow Brome to up the game. And you know, we're using these mixes, but to get that extra productivity is going to take some focus and some drive. That was my question. Yeah.
I guess we should lead that into a question. Do you guys have a comment on what he just said? I know, but we'll.
I certainly have a comment, and Doug's correct. I watch all my grain farmers add 1 or 2 new 55,000 bushel bins a year. Not many people in the room probably remember Silver Smoliak. He spent his entire career at Manyberries trying to develop a new crested wheat variety, or a replacement for crested wheat. And this many years ago, he told me, he said, we thought we had it with Russian wild rye. We thought we had it with Altai wild rye. But he said, ultimately, we have developed better crested wheat. But he spent his entire career of probably 40 some years trying to develop a replacement. But in the main forages, as Doug said, Meadow Brome is kind of about the only new one we've had. We have better varieties of crested wheat, but nothing, you know, in our area, 60 bushel wheat crop used to be a pretty darn good crop. Today, if you're under 100, you're a failure. And same with canola and barley. So.
Those darn crop farmers. Yeah, we battle them all the time, right? You know, we're competing for land, rent, and so, you know, some of the challenges surrounding that is, you know, crop insurance is one of them. Like, you know, our forage insurance just does not match up to what the grain guys can, you know, mitigate their risk. And we're just not in that same game because we used to do quite a bit of dry land hay as well. And we've had to walk away from it. We actually became crop farmers. So.
Don't think I have anything to add to that yet.
I think I agree with Doug that we haven't been able to increase the forage yield as much as some of the other crops have, because I think mainly because in forages, the entire plant is the economic product. What happens in the breeding business is if the seed is the economic product, the breeder tries to move all the photosynthetes to seed so that it would increase seed. The plant may be smaller, but the seed increase would be there. That's how they are doing it. But for forages, the bottleneck is we have the whole plant as the economic product. And most of the time, forages are grown in marginal land and all that, but that is one other. The other important thing I should mention, and because I think we have the Lardner CEO with us, is just think, in whole of Alberta, we have one breeder dealing with all the forages, and forages are not one crop. There are 10 or 20 crops. But for wheat alone, in Lethbridge, we have 3 breeders. So just think about how much effort is going into forage breeding. And I would suggest that if the more effort was going into it, then probably we will make more improvement in these crops too. So that forages have many other good virtues, but just in terms of biomass productivity, we can improve it provided we put more emphasis in it. And one of the things we have figured out in recent years is growing mixed crops yields more biomass compared to monocrops. So I think we are trying to do that, but again, we need more funding in a long-term funding so that we can actually have more effort go into forage breeding.
Can you turn that into a question?
The question, one question I may ask, I was going to ask that question beginning, but I went in the other direction. Have you ever grown chicory? or veg? Anyone in the building, in the room?
There's one.
How about veg? You must have grown veg. So I think these are new crops. I'm always in favor of coming up with new crops and things like that, which may help our industry. But at the same time, any new crop would take a long time to be used. And number one, it would take time to develop it. Number two, it would take time for people to adopt it. So I think I like the method or the model I think Lardner is using, so that the producers and people like that would be in the group already from the very beginning. But that's a good start, but it would definitely take some time. So we have to have some patience and long-term funding for it.
Slicer milk veg I added years ago. That's an old crop. And, you know, all the literature said it was hard to establish. I've had no problem establishing it, and it's come really good. What is chicory? Is it a legume? Is it the grass? I have no idea. Sorry.
I'm no expert in it. But it's a forb. Yeah. Broadly, yeah, I know that broadly part. But what family was it? Sunflower family. Okay. Sunflower.
That was the sunflower family for you people online. Did you actually have a question, Karen? No?
Probably my only question is, well, it's not really a question. It's more like a comment like everybody else here.
So be ready for that.
I guess my thing is, how do we get people to eat more beef? Because I feel there's a connection here. There's that connection between people are scared to eat beef because of the methane emissions, and then therefore because the people don't want to eat more beef, there's less of a demand. Therefore, the crops are taking over, you know, for that plant-based kind of diet. So how the heck do we get people to be more excited about buying beef at the grocery store, buying beef from you guys? That's my question.
That's a very good question. Right now, beef demand is way up. Even with high prices, beef demand is good. But I've promoted beef for 50 years for myself. I promoted for Alberta beef producers. And when I was with Alberta beef producers, we targeted a young housewife feeding 2 or 3 kids. And our mission was to try to get them to eat beef once a week. If I don't have beef many times a week, I think I'm missing. But that is how little beef people are eating in overall. Like back in the day, what was it? Beef was the main one, and we ate a little bit of pork, and the odd person ate some chicken. And I think today it's, what is it, running somewhere around a third. So higher, more chicken. And, you know, there's so much misinformation out there, hormones and antibiotics, like people do not understand. But beef is gluten-free. I advertise, mine is anyway. And I've had people say, your beef can't be, if you feed grain, it can't be gluten-free. Well, I'm sorry, it is. And the whole hormone thing, you know, there's lots of information I won't, but it's negligible. And every piece of beef I sell is antibiotic-free. And every piece of beef you buy in the store is antibiotic-free because there's withdrawal times. And any one of us here, if you get an infected finger and it looks like it's going to fall off and it's throbbing, guess what? You take some penicillin. Why shouldn't you treat your cattle humanely, you know, the same way? But if you respect withdrawal times, and feedlots are really good, I believe, at all that. Our beef is a safe product, a very nutritious product. But people perceive chicken to be healthier. perceive fish to be healthier. Yeah, I like the odd feed of fish and chips, but I don't eat fish every week, I'll confess. So, but right now, and all through COVID, beef consumption was pretty good.
I don't know. I like veggie burgers. No, I'm not done. Like, well, we grew up eating beef, right? I mean, been in the beef business long enough to know well that, it was a challenge, right? I mean, you always like to produce something that's a growing market, and, right. It was this declining market, per capita, right? I'm talking, I mean, because of population growth, it stayed steady, but we, really need to, I mean, trends change, right? The trend was, don't eat beef, and now slowly we're coming around again. So all things, that's the way this world seems to work. Hopefully it's just a phase. And, certainly as a hay producer strictly now, I really love it when, my customers make money. Dairies, they're always your best customers because they always have that steady income, and horse people, well, they just, it's their pets. And, typically beef producers have been, tougher. I mean, they've come through a tough period here, and I can appreciate that, having been in that business.
It's hard to believe it's 20 years since BSC already, coming up pretty soon. The nutritional profile of beef is superior, I understand, believe, and feel, to any other protein source we have. It's not a sensational story. That's why the news doesn't pick it up. We need to put it out, and that's maybe up to the younger people, because I'm not savvy enough to put it up on YouTube or anything, but we need that story out there for the people to see.
So for you people online, if you have a question, and I hope you do, you can post that as well. So you are included in this conversation. Dwayne, we have you next.
I have a question. This feeds on Doug's comments about increasing yields. Have any of you guys on the panel played with hybrid rye? Because what I hear from some of my irrigated guys who are growing it for silage, it seems to be exceptional on yield compared to anything else they've grown.
Okay, I've watched lots of it in our area. The guys took it either for silage or for grain. I haven't grown it personally. I've encouraged my silage people to grow it. It's been, I think, very good. Seed was very expensive. But one of the things I'm looking at right now is surge triticale, and it's a summer triticale. And Surrey is nodding his head. We're told it'll yield 30% better than barley. And so right now, I'm encouraging people that are going to seed summer silage to seed at least if not straight surge triticale, maybe a surge triticale oat mix, and then go back in with hybrid rye. But yeah, I've seen really good results on hybrid rye.
No, we have not.
I have not either. But a question for Surrey: is surge triticale a smooth on, or is it rougher?
I'm not 100% sure, but it is probably on. But the other crop that also can yield very high is sorghum Sudan grass hybrid, but it would require water. If you grow it in very dry land areas, it may not grow well, but if it is grown under irrigation, it can grow really well.
Sorry, just keep the mic for a minute. I've been reading and hearing everything that this sorghum Sudan will grow in extremely dry conditions, where as a big plant, I would think it. And did you say surge was on? Yeah. Surge is totally onless.
Onless? Okay.
Surge triticale is onless. That's what makes it so attractive for silage.
I don't know very much. That's why we initially said that. But because of the yield, I thought maybe it is on. But anyway, what was your question for me?
Well, sorghum Sudan, and it makes sense that everything we grow likes water. And as a big plant, how can it grow big without water? Exactly. But I've been reading that, we could even seed it into direct seed it into hayland and dry and it'll grow. And I'm going to try some this year.
These are dryland crops elsewhere, but they don't have 16 inches of precipitation in the entire year. They have more than that. And when we have very small amount of precipitation here, those crops are, and particularly the hybrids, they grow very rapidly, very, very big. And to support that growth, you have to have some kind of moisture. Under irrigation, I had seen in Lethbridge, it was really phenomenal, right? Like corn crop.
We've got something online here.
Awesome.
Again, it doesn't look like it's a question.
I'm going to make everybody pose it as a question. So be ready for that, guys.
And what is, I'm not a professional in your field, so triticale?
Triticale.
Triticale is a great crop. I tried my best. Yields well in the parkland region. And another comment, just a comment on forage chicory. Jan Slomp had a field with a chicory component with Kira clover west of Rimby in the mid-2000s before his family moved. And then another comment, caution regarding prussic acid in, oh, you guys, somebody else who knows this stuff, read this, please. Sorghum Sudan grass.
Those weren't questions, but Anne, you had a question? Anne?
Hi. Yeah, hello, everybody. My name is Anne Hunemeyer. I'm with Alberta Agriculture. And I'm an economist by heart and by training. So forgive me if maybe my question is a little bit too basic here, but what I really wanted to say is that I really liked how the day today articulated this relationship between carbon sequestration and the environmental goods and services that forage lands provides and the livestock industry. And so my question is probably to Bart, because you were talking about the feeding system. So I wonder whether there is some room to capitalize more on the grassland finishing. So basically to make the beef production more efficient in terms of actually finishing off the animals at a larger scale. I understand that is more of a, not a niche product, but most of the beef is finished in feedlots. And so there is whether you have a bit of a separation between the grassland-based forage. And when we're thinking about adding value to the forage land to not only capture private benefits, but also public benefits, which are not necessarily valued or paid for in the market, then I wonder whether that is something that you guys have looked into or whether the panel maybe has some experience with. Thank you.
You've just opened up a polarizing political question. We've walked down this path. Well, you know, so we went with the SRI program that you see Ed's part of with the carbon sequestration, and our pitch on that was to try and look at forage finished beef. But because there's a Western Canadian feedlot industry, they wouldn't buy it. So hence that 2 million Ed was hanging out there, and we now have a forage utilization chair at U of S. Yeah, so, but on the other aspect, I think we were 10 years ahead of our time with that idea. And, but on the other hand, you look at a project we just finished with Dr. John McKinnon, looking at taking out PETs or performance enhancing technologies. And we came away, you know what, if you're going to take away the implants and the growth promotants and those types of things, you're going to be having to pay 30–40% more for that animal or that meat protein. And so is the consumer ready to pay for that? you know, in my world, and I think in Ed's world, I get in front of like 400 or 500 students every year. In fact, I just came off teaching a first-year class, and 80 students in this class, and it was called Animal Bioscience, so animal production. And you know, we asked them at the first day, how many want to be veterinarians? And 79 hands went up. And so it was my job to break hearts, which I did. You know what? You better have plan B. And you know, my lab group, which I didn't show a picture of, and it was International Women's Day yesterday, by the way. My lab group is totally female for some reason, all my students. But, you know, and I train them to be ag advocates, and one sitting right there, Courtney, and she knows that it's you, and it's the ones coming out of our programs are going to have to send this message, not old guys like me. And it's those first year ag students that I hammer on and say, you guys are going to have to tell the other 99% who don't grow food where their food comes from. And Costco's not the farmer. End of story. And so, and on the eating the beef business and implants and estrogen, one of my lectures is, you know what, you beer drinkers, there's like 10-fold more estrogen in beer than there is in a serving of beef. And look at the birth control pill. So, you know, I mean, that's the problem, right? Is that we're not telling that story accurately enough. But I know I'm getting on a little bit of a rampage here, but still, I think the consumer is going to ask for that extended forage finished product at some point, because I know I'm over in Sweden and Finland and it's there on the shelf. So.
Good comments. And no, not Ed, sorry. But Bart. The other thing on grass-fed, these animals are on this planet about twice as long as a grain-fed animal. And along with the associated extra costs, one of them is water usage. A grass-fed steer going to slaughter has used about twice as much water in his lifetime. And, you know, we had a speaker here last year that told us the benefits of grass-fed beef. And he was pretty accurate, I believe. And, you know, right now I'm eating some grass-fed beef that I raised, and hey, it's good, but so is every other beef, including what I ate last night. I had a steak here and we had beef today. But there's a lot of extra costs to raising grass-fed beef. I think that's one of the messages.
Okay, so my comment is I got one customer, he's east or west of Airdrie there, and you know, it's a small time guy doing about 30 or 40 cows. And so he's finishing, you know, his steers or his feeders on grass. And so, you know, I was able to supply him with some fairly high quality, I guess, Timothy hay, some second cut that, you know, the numbers were good on it, and those, as well as some oats. And so, you know, and then I challenged them on it. I, you know, of course, being a former feedlot operator, and we fed a lot of barley, you know, to give me some, you know, cut of this beef grass fed, and is actually a lot better than I anticipated. So.
Yeah, but you've been eating veggie burgers, so.
We raise grass-fed beef, we sell it, and we promote it. Our challenge is finishing it for half the year. We need our researchers to develop a grass that would grow in the winter, and it would be off to the races.
Oh, we have a question over there.
People will eat as much beef as they can afford and eat as much chicken as they could stand, is what I heard about 25, 30 years ago. And it's probably still true. I guess what hasn't changed is that we've been talking, like preaching to the converted. We've all convinced ourselves about the value of, and not just beef, but red meat, because we got other livestock in the forage industry as well. So who do we have to convince? And it's most of the people that are living on concrete, and have to appreciate where the whole livestock production and forages are contributing to that whole ecosystem. That starts to sound a little bit more less nutritional and more egotistical or idealistic, but we have to sell that whole integrated system. So how do you, each of you, think that would be the best way to go about that in the populations that do not live in rural Alberta or rural Western Canada?
You know, one of the big topics here for the last while, and they're calling the grocery CEOs on the carpet for why it's the big increases. Well, there's two things. And years ago, I saw some research that if you stop well, let's use ladies but anybody at the door of the grocery store leaving with their groceries, and they're saying, I just paid $300 for this cart of groceries. About half of it is not food. There's a new broom, there's toilet paper, there's towels, there's toothpaste, a lot of junk food. About half of it is not food. And, you know, costs are going up. The grocery store guy, everything we buy comes on a truck. Their diesel fuel doubled, their utilities doubled. But getting back, it's a big part of education. Like people tell me they price either hamburger or prime rib. Well, I eat every part of the animal from the front end to the back end and properly cooked. I love a chuck roast. Nothing wrong with a chuck roast. Everything has to be cooked properly. I don't eat prime rib every day. Yeah, I'd probably like to. But I tell people when you go in a grocery store, look at a tri-tip, either in steak or roast. It's priced with chuck and it's one of the best cuts on a whole animal. So if you know a little about your beef, you can shop. Hey, and there's often specials. We shop at Sobeys. Every week we go there. You know, and I walk by the beef counter occasionally, and there's specials. So shop properly. Don't just go in there and fill your cart, but it's education.
Yeah, selling more beef. So I kind of got an education once. We were in Tokyo and we have to go to a World Food Fair, I believe it was, Expo or something. And so, you know, it's interesting. We see Alberta beef and we know it to be the best in the world, or we think so, and eat it all the time. So, but then, you know, you go downtown Tokyo and, you know, special restaurants will serve this, but really, you know, the average, you know, Asian, right? They just cut it up and you know, they add a lot of other flavors to it. So I guess I'm saying, you know, those are the people that consume most of our beef. You know, it's mostly, you know, export that we depend on. I mean, locally, domestically, I mean, what are we, you know, I mean, city of Tokyo's got as many people as all of Canada, right? So.
ABP used to have a good cookbook that we gave out to beef customers when we were selling beef, and it was a good resource for them how to use the other cuts, because a lot of people had never had a whole or a half or a quarter of an animal, and what do you do with the rest of them? As John says, it's really good meat, but how do you prepare it? A lot of the ultra processed foods shouldn't be considered foods either in lots of ways. They're not good for us and not good for our population in general.
Oh, and we have Doug again. Is it a question, Doug?
It's a question.
Oh, good.
And I'm going to take it in an entirely different direction here. Grant started off by talking about the drop in forage acres, and so question for Mark and maybe for Bart, the panel. What are the conversations happening in the wheat, barley, canola world, the other cropping worlds, where if you have to think about soil health and doing something positive, not just defending what you're currently doing, what are the opportunities there for forages? Are they saying, you know, we need forages, but we can't get what we need, or what are the challenges there and opportunities?
I'm just thinking, because I don't think anyone has ever raised that point. When I speak to, it can be the oat growers, the barley, wheat, they are focused on the monocrop. Now, if we can demonstrate a return on investment in terms of intercropping or doing something, I think then you have the opportunity to change some practice. having that ROI data is essential to get people to change. Otherwise, it's easy for them to keep on doing what they've always done.
Yeah, great question, Doug. On that, just some thought about that. You know, there are programs that are working with straight cropping guys who are seeing a loss of their organic matter because of it's export. There's no import. That's the problem, and it's inorganic imports. And so, you know, what we're trying to do is work with those producers. And so the world I live in, salinity is a big issue in Saskatchewan. Like there's thousands of acres of saline issues. And so why are these straight grain guys putting in that, whatever it is, 200 plus an acre input to grow wheat when nothing grows because of, you know, high electric conductivity issues there, greater than 7. So, you know, I mean, we heard about the AC saltlander. I totally agree with you. That's a great grass species. The issue there was the cheatgrass issue, you know, there with the seed. But I think we resolved that. I'm working with Billy Gatu at U of S on his new alfalfa, CDC Salt King, I believe it is. So, you know, if we can work with these producers and just show we can seed down 40 acres or 80 acres that's not producing anything for cash crop and get some benefits of that forage from that, that's something. Even roll it up and sell it as hay, let alone putting a cow on your cropland. So that's kind of the stuff that we're thinking of going forward.
Cool. Okay. Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw something in here. A few years ago, I had a an exchange student from Sweden that came to the U of A. She was looking for classes and she picked my senior range class to sit in. She was actually, I believe it was a food science student. And one of the things that really blew me away, it was more of a discussion-based class. Excuse me. And one of the things that stunned me is when we talked about her home operation in central Sweden. It was a small, basically beef operation. I think they had 40 or 45 heads, something like that. But almost 2/3 of their revenue came from environmental programs. It didn't come from the cattle themselves. And she listed off all of these programs, paying for agroforestry, biodiversity, this and that, and it kept going and it kept going. And I kept wondering, well, where's this money coming from? First of all, that's the main question, because if we're just relying on willingness to pay, then we're relying on really the cash flow of individual consumers to put their money behind a willingness to pay. And there are people that are willing to pay, 4 times what a typical, store-bought chicken is to buy a range chicken. They're willing to do that. But if their income ever changes, they won't do that anymore. So then the question becomes, what's the level of revenue that people are willing to pay of their discretionary income, their disposable income, for a premium beef product, which ours is. I totally agree. Then you look at what's going on in a country like Sweden, where there are operations that are literally making 2/3 of their revenue from environmental programs. And I'm thinking to myself, it's probably the way it should be, because we know that grass farmers and ranchers are providing a service. The things that Bart talked about, biodiversity, water purification, water storage, flood mitigation, endangered species habitat, all of these things are being provided, but right now there's no revenue stream. How do we get there? And that's the only way to really, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, but to increase the profitability of these operations is to increase the size of the pie. Otherwise, you're shuffling chairs on the deck and you're not really changing the formula. You're always going to be marginalized until you really bring those revenue streams in. And if it's always a willingness to pay by the consumer, that's going to be an issue. So I talked before about top down and bottom up. Bottom up is consumer driven. That's where they put their money. I'm convinced that's part of it. But the ecosystem goods and services has also got to come from the top down. Because is willingness to pay from the consumer Are they going to be willing to do that, to pay for grasslands that are also supporting species at risk? I don't know. Anyways, just a comment. I wanted to share that observation.
And we are over time, but whenever I chair panels like this, I always like to get just closing thoughts. So if we could just do, you know, a quick closing thought on the day, on whatever's on your mind. Let's hear it.
Well, I think it's again been a wonderful day. We've had excellent speakers. There's one problem with today. There's not enough seats in the chairs. A lot of people in Alberta should be here and hearing the message that we've heard here today. For the most part, here you're talking to the believers, but good speakers, good program. Thank you to the organizers of today, and safe travel home.
Yeah, he took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say. Thanks, John. But yeah, you know, as a hay producer, this is really my first time. You know, I attended online last year, but that was my first exposure to this group. And you know, I'm with John. Like, there needs to be more producers in the room. I think that's crucial, and maybe that's up to us. And then lastly, I'd like to put my CFGA hat on as a director and chair. You know, I'd like to thank Ed first of all. You know, like Grant, give me credit, you know, for really ramping up the organization as it is today. But really, it's guys like Ed that started it off the ground and worked hard, and numerous others that have as well. Ray, you know, it's kudos to them, and I'd like to give them a round of applause for, you know, really getting the CFG off the ground. Thank you.
This is the second AGM I've attended for AFIN. I've enjoyed both of them great. Last year, this year, there are lots of good information out of it. I'm glad I drove up for them. I'd like to shout out to both AFIN and to CFGA too, and all the applied associations for the work that they've done in promoting our forages in Canada.
Yeah, I think we have you up next, don't we? So Surya's gonna close it. You guys are free to go. You're free birds.
Thank you, everyone, especially our sponsors and the participants, particularly those who came out from a distance to give us some information and things like that. Thank you, Bart. Thank you, Bork. I think it was very nice of you to have come to let us know some of the new things you are doing. We enjoy, I think, we enjoy meeting here. I think our board members rarely meet. This is once in a year we get a chance to meet each other. We only see through Zoom meetings or phone calls, we meet each other, but this is a fantastic occasion for us to be together. And it was nice that so many of our board members could come. It was, we missed the few that could not come. We normally take a picture of the new board after our meeting, but because we are missing 2-3 of our board members, we're not doing it this time. But again, I thank you all for coming out and spending your whole day with us. And also, I really liked the exchange. I think we are freely talking to each other, and that is the only way we can probably make this forage industry move forward. And I really liked Mark to be here, to be with us, listen to us, and hopefully we will be able to, now we have come up with a plan, 10-year plan, but unless it is implemented, it would be totally useless. So I think now our job would be to find a way to implement some of the things we think we should be able to do. And I think with help from the government and RDAR, BCRC, and probably ABP, we will be able to implement some of it. And we can brag about it in 4 or 5 years' time that we have done something for this industry. Okay, with that, lastly, I should not forget Amanda and her husband, Dave. Thank you very much for organizing this and helping us run it smoothly. And I hope those who are joining us through Zoom also joined or enjoyed this this day and the deliberations of the day. And I would wish you all a very nice trip back. I have come from Lethbridge, but I think most of you are probably not from that far away. So, have a good trip back. And this is the end of the session.